is the week here, Sunday, that we do contemporary teaching or contemporization of a teaching. As several of you know, I've set the Metta Sutra to music. It's kind of country. Is it country? I don't know what it is.
Ragtime.
Ragtime. Ragtime. It's kind of ragtime. So next week, you'll be regaled by the performance of the Metta Sutra in English and music. I want to put in a plug for memorization. But as I'm doling these things out, I want to make sure I'm a graphic designer by profession as well as industrial designer. These are my attempts to make simple handouts that people can take. And this gray card has current weekly ASCC schedule, and it lists things that are happening Sunday, Wednesday, and the evenings and mornings and so on. And in the back, it has a little thing on Dana, which Brian was talking about today, generosity or giving. So this is a good one for you to have at home and post near your desk or wherever as a reminder to our continuing program. This is one that we give out to newcomers. So if you're a newcomer, if you haven't seen it, this is a new one. It's kind of, now I'm here, what do I do? Kind of thing. The four things. It repeats the schedule. It also has a link online where you can go become a member, as Brian was mentioning this morning. So I tend to overdo this because I can always come up with another format. And, maybe overdoing it a little bit, but that's what those are for. So always check out the front desk. And I have a general one. If you don't have my contact information, this is just Zen meditation, and this is something you can give to a friend who's interested in meditation. We want you to invite them and bring them. If each of us brings a friend, we double our membership overnight. Attendance, anyway. We double our attendance for that evening. So we want you to take this and invite friends. We think Zen is for everyone. Not everyone is ready for Zen. And a lot of people come to us through other forms of meditation. We think Zen meditation is the simplest or the most stripped down. Now in Rinzai, maybe get a little more complicated because the teacher relationship is very different in Rinzai. Soto Zen is pretty laid back. Soto Zen teachers are more like a coach, kind of a coaching function for your practice. Right? So with that, are we rolling yet?
We are.
So here we are. Please enjoy your tea. Atlanta Soto Zen Center. This is December 15th? 16th. December 16th. We've just passed Rohatsu. Last weekend was our Rohatsu retreat, where we sit up all night that Saturday night. And that was interesting. Those of you who participated.
Catching water.
Say it again?
Catching water.
We were catching a lot of water over there. It was a very rainy night. Our landlady said, when your roof leaks, everybody else's roof leaks, and that's why you can't get the roofers out in time. That's one of those anomalies, right? Everybody's roof starts leaking, and then roofers can't get to everybody because everybody's roof is leaking. There was a story I meant to tell around that, a famous story about a Zen master in a monastery, I think in China. And one of the monks complained that they were sitting there in meditation, the water was dripping in on their head. And so they bring this to the abbot, and he says, "Move down." And he says, "Why waste a lot of time fixing this building, instead of doing what you're here to do?" So there's a lesson in that. So anything I'm not thinking to mention before we launch into this? ASCC, December 15th. Welcome online. You can send questions in. We have a monitor watching the screen, so that if you have some questions you would like to hear some answers to, or an answer to, please call them in. So today's subject, the month of December is dedicated to Shakyamuni Buddha, just as the month of November is dedicated to Matsuoka Roshi, founder's month. He was born and died in November. So we always remember him in November, and we feature his teachings for the whole month. Meaning we feature them on Sundays and Thursday evenings, and we're getting a little more coordinated about this. We're trying to get more of an annual kind of curriculum month by month. We're not pushing it too hard, but so that the book reading groups will also read Matsuoka's reading and so forth. So we have a little coordinated kind of, and the Tuesday night online, which now is Zoom, by the way, not Skype. Zoom has turned out to be a lot less glitchy. And if you're talking, your face comes up on screen. So if you don't want your face on screen, don't say anything. So we want to try to get these a little more coordinated. The retreat committee and some other folks are working. We have about 20, approaching 24, 24 centers nationally and in Canada, other affiliated groups. So we think part of our best practice is to have us be somewhat on the same page, but have every affiliate be able to do their own thing as well. So we suggest best practices. We're not a top-down organization. We're a grassroots, ground-up organization. When people try things at one of our affiliates and it works, then we want them to share that with us, and others may try to be able to do the same thing. So we're pretty creative and innovative about our program. We're not stuck in a fixed idea of how to practice and teach Zen. We know Zen cannot be taught, it can only be learned. So it's our responsibility to set up the vehicles by which people can participate and learn. Not only meditation, although that's for us in Soto Zen, that's the key, that's the most important thing. And we approach meditation in a very generic way. We talk about it as natural posture, natural breath, natural state of mind, so forth. Not too mystical, in other words. And Dharma is the second level of learning, you might say, distant second from Buddha or Zazen, from Buddha, learning Buddha insight or awakening. Buddha means awaken. So waking up on the cushion is the most important thing. Doesn't necessarily happen on the cushion, but time on the cushion helps us to relieve ourselves of confusion, our own opinions, our own ideas about, especially about Zen, what it's teaching, so that it trains us to be ready to have a potential awakening like Buddha, or potential insight into reality, like all the ancestors had. Second comes Dharma, which are primarily words, teaching about about this experience in words. But they're all still pointing at the experiential truth. It's not like a secondary level of learning that's all about words. It's more the words are trying to point at the experience. And this Heart Sutra is exactly that. It's a testament to what happens in general when we sit in meditation, or what can happen. And then thirdly is Sangha. Sangha is community. So we learn from each other. One of my teachers, Barbara Cohen from the Suzuki lineage, said we live in these residential situations, including all the way up to including a full monastic lifestyle, to rub the rough edges off of each other, kind of like stones rolling in the river. Polishing, you could say, polishing, that kind of training. So we get smoother. We get smoother in our interactions with each other. So Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, those three treasures of Buddhism are also sort of the three levels of training. You could think of them that way. We don't want to lose sight of the first one. Zazen is essential in Soto Zen. The other two are not so essential, but they are meant to be supportive to your sitting practice. So the exercise we do today with these Dharma talks is really only relevant to our sitting practice. I think of the documentation, as I've often said, as kind of like software documentation. If you're not using the application, it doesn't mean anything. If you're applying it, then this can be meaningful. Right? So let me first ask a question. Who here knows the Heart Sutra by heart? How many have memorized it by now in English? Anybody feel like they know I'm not gonna ask you to leave it or anything, no. Don't worry,
Not completely.
not completely.
I always think I know it, and then some line surprises me.
When you chant it in a group, you memorize it before you realize you've memorized it, because you hear what everybody else is saying. Matsuoka Roshi used to say, chant with the ears, not with the mouth. So you listen to everybody, and in the Hanya Shingo, the Japanese version, Sino-Japanese, it's old ancient Chinese Japanese. I couldn't memorize it until I could know what it's saying in English. So I was thinking in English and chanting in Japanese, and finally got to where I could get through the whole thing. But there was a turning point at which, thank you. It was as if the chant, the Hanya Shingo, the Japanese version, was coming from inside, like somebody else was chanting it, and I was just hearing it. And I think that's one of the interesting aspects of memorization. I encourage everybody to take these liturgy pieces, which are not that long, some are 2 or 3 pages long, they get kind of long, and memorize them in English in particular. Because just sheer repetition, after a while, you'll be driving along on the expressway or sitting in a traffic jam, going through this in your mind, something will just hit you out of the text. Oh, that's what that means. It's kind of like a gobsmacked or something. Memorization has many qualities, and I'm afraid it's a lost art. How many of us do any memorization of any kind? Anybody? And you're in law, so is that what it is?
Yeah.
What do you memorize?
Rules.
Really?
Such as, can you quote any?
Yeah. I guess for tort law, you'd have to memorize things like battery. Battery has to be a touching, harmful, or offensive. I mean, just things like that. And there's like a list of like these are the elements of battery, or these are the elements of assault, and then you have to apply them to a problem set.
The battery is different from assault.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to differentiate.
Yeah, assault is the imminent apprehension of it getting hit, and then battery is just getting hit. So you can commit a battery and not an assault, but it's just lost. So.
Please do that again.
So you can hit someone and behind them, and you wouldn't be assaulting them because they wouldn't be imminently apprehending getting hit. So they wouldn't have that fear of, oh, you're gonna hit me. Because that's just. But if I do that, that could be an assault.
Oh.
And then that is battery and assault.
So it's a further injury.
Yeah.
Because of the fright.
It's good to know
Yeah, basically.
where do you draw the line?
Psychological fright.
Uh-huh.
Or damage. Something like that.
So it's less damaging to hit blindside someone.
You probably be liable for only battery. Yeah.
Good to know.
Good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a legal expert at all. I'm only one semester. That's not much.
Anybody remember anything they memorized at one point in your life? You were in school or as a kid? Or,
Poetry and stuff like that.
yeah. Anybody can quote anything they remember?
Sure. I mean, I know a Shel Silverstein poem that I memorized when I was in
Let's
fourth
hear it.
grade.
That's a good one.
What? Shel Silverstein?
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
While fishing in the Blue Lagoon, I caught a lovely silver fish, and he spoke to me, my boy, quoth he, please set me free and I'll grant your wish. A kingdom of wisdom, a palace of gold are all the goodies your fancies can hold. So I set him free, and he swam away and he laughed at me, whispering my foolish wish into a silent sea. Today I caught that fish again, that lovely silver prince of fishes, and once again he offered me, if I would only set him free, any one of a number of wonderful wishes. It was delicious.
I remember a short one from Silverstein. It was oh, you fiddly dee. Might get all the others, but you won't get me. You fiddly dee. You might get all the others, but. Anybody else? Anything?
You said from earlier the Latin Mass, right? Earlier today you said the Latin Mass, when we were chanting, like the Latin Mass. So from the Latin Mass, you memorize the Credo and the Our Father.
Can you chant one of them? Or recite one?
I can chant them both. Yeah, the Credo's pretty long. Maybe let's say the Our Father.
Yeah.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Oh, but it's in English.
It's in English, yeah.
Yeah.
The Latin, right? So, but most, I think Christian denominations would memorize the Credo and the Our Father.
I remember the Our Father from Protestant upbringing.
Is that the Apostles' Creed?
Similar,
Is it
it's a
similar?
little bit different. But the Credo is like the Apostles' Creed.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anywhere in there an actual, what I call apostolic imperative, the charge that you must go forth and spread the gospel? That the apostles had that imperative,
The Great Commission.
they had to do that?
Use
The Great Commission.
Is that what that's called? Commission, they were commissioned to do this.
Go out and teach our mission.
I don't remember ever having that in Mass.
Well, memorization, I think, is something that we'd like to, I think, it's very appropriate in the terms of this kind of material, because it's pointing at something so subtle that it doesn't quite, words don't quite capture it. And so it's the repetition of the words that seems to help make it come out. Okay, so before we go on, or as we're going on, anybody remember anything from the Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra that they can quote and or ask a question about that maybe sticks with you, stuck out for you, stands out for you, and you don't know what it means, or you think you know what it means, or does this stand out for anybody? Anybody have something from the Heart Sutra that they remember? Any piece of it? We first started training my students to give talks. They said, well, what do we talk about? I said, let's start with the Heart Sutra. So they would take a piece of it. That's what they would talk about. Or they talk about the whole thing.
I have a question. Why do we use this version? I've heard so many different versions. Why did you choose this one?
This is what is called the consensus version
Okay.
that was put out by Soto Shu America some years ago. We had our own favorite version of it that my senior Dharma brother Kongo Roshi had developed with a bunch of Americans. We didn't have English when I first started practicing in the 60s. We only had the Japanese. And so my senior Dharma brother in Chicago got with a group, and they came up with a translation in English. And Matsuoka Roshi approved it. And when we were at a ascending the mountain ceremony for a Shun temple in LA that we were invited to attend with Okamura Roshi, Akira Roshi, some of the leaders of Soto Shu. In the Zen center, which was set up like a church with pews, the back of the pews, the card you pulled out to chant the sutra in English was Matsuoka Roshi's card. He originally had it printed with the Japanese calligraphy, the literal pronunciation of those underneath, and then a very literal translation in English, which garbled up the English so you couldn't really chant it that way because it was just translating up there. But that's, and the translation we used was kind of smoothed out by Kongo and the others. But as I said, for me to learn the Japanese memorized, couldn't memorize it. It took a while in English too. So we were using that one, but when I started doing my formal ceremonies, my formal procedures to align us with the Soto Zen Buddhist Association of America and the ways most people were refining sort of this, turns out that almost every place you go, they do a different English version because they have their own favorite version their teacher gave them or something. Well, Americans are stubborn, they don't want to conform. But we went ahead and we said, we'll just conform to the consensus version of it. I don't think it's perfect. When I set this to music, I changed a lot of the language. And so that gets a little confusing when you have more than one running in your head at once.
It seems clunky at sometimes to me.
Yeah, I've read smoother ones and more poetic ones. So any other questions?
With nothing to attain, a bodhisattva relies on prajnaparamita.
Say
So
it
you
again.
said, is there any piece of it that stands out? That piece of it, every time we chant it, stands out. With nothing to attain, a bodhisattva relies on prajnaparamita.
Yeah.
To me, that's like, if you understand that piece of it, then you got it.
Yeah, prajnaparamita literally means the perfecting of wisdom. And so it's almost circular to say that's what I rely upon. I'm relying on the perfecting of wisdom. But in Zen, at least, we understand that to mean experientially, primarily through meditation.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that we don't attain anything by doing that. Nothing actually changes. But as I was saying before, we divest ourselves of our own ignorance, or we divest ourselves of our own weird ideas eventually, right? And so true wisdom, according to traditional Buddhism, the Eightfold Path is right view, right thought, right speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, meditation. The meditation is usually placed last in the laying out of the chart, but everybody knows that's where you start. That's what comes first. And eventually you might get around to right view and right thought. That is like going through right speech, action, livelihood, outer conduct. In other words, effort, mindfulness, meditation, inner discipline. Your view and your thought will evolve and come to approximate Buddha's view and thought, you could say, of the world, of reality. So to say that the Bodhisattva relies on prajnaparamita with nothing to attain, I think it's pointing directly at meditation. It's just saying we're relying on this method, as Dogen calls it, the excellent method. This excellent method is handed down to us. We think this is what Buddha was doing at the time of his awakening. Sitting in a kind of meditation that is not like, say, mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness meditation from this perspective is very limited to setting aside our usual thought process, which is part of Zen, but mindfulness meditation, as it's popularly construed now, as I understand it, has nothing to do with coming to some sort of insight into reality. It's more of a psychological concept, I think, that it helps you get along, helps you cope, helps you, right? It's a little bit more utilitarian that way. The implication of meaning, you might say, of meditation in Buddhism is much, much deeper than that. And so to not rely on anything, which is one of Dogen's premises, he'd say over and over, sitting without making effort, without aiming at it, without relying on anything. In other words, all the baggage we bring in with us isn't going to help. There's a turning point at which it just becomes what is called shikantaza, just precisely sitting. It has no other sort of layers of meaning associated with it. That makes sense?
Yeah. It seems like maybe what I'm about to say is kind of a stretch, but this line, it seems like when you're sitting in zazen and you're sort of trying, or you get drug away by your thoughts, and then you come back to the zazen, that you come up with a thought about how you were able to do that, which actually comes after you doing that, but you didn't really do it. So when you bring your thinking back, or let your thinking go, it seems like the part of you that's coming up with some kind of idea about how you did that is the part that's trying to attain something.
Yeah.
Right? That's the part that's trying to sort of muscle through it or use some kind of willpower to do meditation, right?
Right.
And it seems like this line to me is whatever that is underneath that, whatever that subconscious piece is,
Right.
or whatever that unconscious piece is, that actually brings you back. And I'm sure it's much broader than that, but I don't know what that is.
It's sometimes referred to as Buddha seeking Buddha. In other words, the awakening is itself wanting to happen, so to say. And we're getting in the way. Right? And so it just wants to happen, just as birth wants to happen. We see the fecundity of nature. Obviously everything wants to be alive. And so many things that don't make it. So many seeds and so many spores, etc., just don't make it. Tadpoles, whatever. But everything wants to be alive. And similarly, this is a weird idea. It's like there's an impulse, mental formation, underlying a motive that, in a sense, is not you personally. It's more like life expressing this. And Dogen, many people sentence and have many expressions like that. Kind of take us out of the driver's seat.
Is it related to Prajnaparamita?
I think so. Prajnaparamita is the perfecting of wisdom. We learn, for instance, we come into Zen. I think we all think that we're controlling our breathing. We're controlling all this stuff we think about. And in our Zazen, we begin to find out not at all. The body is doing the breathing. We're not doing it. If you get knocked out, hit on the head with a bat, the body will keep breathing. The body does the living. The body will do the dying. There's not a whole lot you can do about it. So there's kind of a paranoia in that. Like, oh no, I thought I was in charge of something. But there's also a sense of relief that it's really not my doing, not my responsibility on a very fundamental level. So, one of the things he talks about, Dogen talks about the bird and the fish, and the bird leaves the air, it will die at once. Fish leaves the water, it will die at once. Know that the air is life, and the water is life. The bird is life, and the fish is life. Life must be the bird, and life must be the fish. Life must be the bird, life must be the fish. So life must be me, life must be Brian, life must be Chris, life must be. Well, life is manifesting as this. So kind of the wave in the ocean thing. We're the wave, but we're not the ocean, right? I think it means something similar. So let's go through this quickly. We'll do it in the oral style and ask you not to look at your written copy, remembering that these teachings in India were transmitted orally. And let's see, as we go through this, and before you look at your copy again, after we go through this one time, then see if something stands out for you that you would like to bring up for discussion. Okay. So I think I've got this memorized, but because we're doing this together, I don't want to mess this up. So I'll start. Part of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra.
Part of great.
Ava.
No, I was going to, go ahead. Go ahead.
Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when deeply practicing Prajnaparamita, clearly saw that all five aggregates are empty, and thus relieved all suffering. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness, emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness, emptiness itself form. Sensation, perception, formations, and consciousness are also like this. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked by emptiness. They neither arise nor cease, are neither defiled nor pure, neither increase nor decrease. Therefore, given emptiness, there is no form, no sensation, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. No sight, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of sight, no realm of mind consciousness. There is neither ignorance nor extinction of ignorance, neither old age and death nor extinction of old age and death. No suffering, no cause, no cessation, no path, no knowledge, and no attainment. With nothing to attain, a bodhisattva relies on Prajnaparamita, and thus the mind is without hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Far beyond all inverted views, one realizes nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future rely on Prajnaparamita, and thereby attain unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. Therefore know the Prajnaparamita as the great miraculous mantra, the great bright mantra, the supreme mantra, the incomparable mantra, which removes all suffering and is true, not false. Therefore, we proclaim the Prajnaparamita mantra, the mantra that says, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhisattva, which roughly translated means gone, gone to the other shore, attained the other shore, enlightenment accomplished. But we never translate these dharanis. And usually, in some, it's called a dharani. I think there's a slight difference between a mantra and a dharani. Mantra, maybe the meaning of a mantra was kind of skewed by transcendental meditation. So there it is. Anything pop out for you, just reciting it once through.
The form and emptiness is always, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Um, I guess you would have to really understand emptiness and form. They seem different, but it says they do not differ.
They're not different from, and I think the expression "not different from" still creates too much separation between the two. Okamura Roshi said, when you say form, you're already saying emptiness. When you say emptiness, you're already saying form. So it's a
Why is
little
that?
more.
Why is that?
Well, there's a sign in mathematics, and I don't know what it is, but one of our mathematics guys told me, if you say form equals emptiness in a formula, right? Then you're setting form on this side of the equal sign and emptiness on that side of the equal sign, as if they can be separated and then made equal, and then described as equal. But he's saying there's a sign in math that is like an equal sign, but it's not the unequal sign. It's another one that says these two cannot be separated from the beginning. It means more like that. So I like the phrase, and what I use in the musical version is form is innately emptiness. Emptiness innately form. It's innate. The form is innate in the emptiness. The emptiness is innate in the form. And I think it's a bit more like E equals mc squared, the relationship of matter to energy that we understand, right? We don't separate matter off as a separate entity from energy anymore. We used to, and a lot of people still do in the world, right? But if you understand the physics formulation, matter is an impounded form of energy. Energy is the bigger one under which matter is subsumed. Matter is a special case of energy, right? There's a lot of energy in the universe that isn't matter. It's radiant. We say, well, a photon is a particle, that's matter. Then you get into this weird anomaly of, well, it's both a particle and a wave, so it can't really be a particle, right? So you get right down to the edge of duality when you begin to look at this. Well, Buddha was asked in his lifetime, they had the concept of the atom. And it was a pretty simple concept as I understand it. You can take a cookie, you can cut it in half, right? And you can cut the half in half, and then you can cut the quarter in half and so forth. So they were asking Buddha, said, what happens when you get down to the last particle and you cut that in half? And Buddha said, then you're right on the edge of form and emptiness. So if you understand it almost in a physical sense, you could see that it's not such a confusing idea, right? And sometimes the word appearance is used instead of form. So if you say appearance is not separate from or different from emptiness, what we're seeing, what appears to us, right, in seeing, hearing, feeling, through our senses, what appears to us seems to be solid, right? But now we have instrumentation. We can go down in there with an electron microscope, right? And if we believe that somebody isn't building a piece of equipment that's meant to fool us, right? We can see that there's more space than stuff in here, right? We now have pictures of atoms, So I think from a modernist perspective, a simple way to express it, I say, form is what we know. Form is what we're familiar with. Emptiness is what we're looking for. Emptiness is what we're not familiar with, right? Emptiness is beyond the classic range of physics. Emptiness is more on the micro level. But if it's on the micro level, then it's on every level. Micro and macro.
But I heard that once in Asia that sometimes emptiness really was considered fullness. So
What was the word?
in emptiness in Asia, sometimes when they say emptiness, that is empty, they see it as being full. It's not as we see it as emptiness, but it also the concept of them of emptiness is fullness.
Yeah.
So
It's really the resolution of the one and the many. The old Taoist term says, the many return to the one. To what does the one return? And you could glibly say, well, it returns back to the many, so it's a back and forth kind of idea. But We understand emptiness now to be full. It's not void. Void is the old term that was used. These are English terms that translate ancient Sanskrit and other terms. So we don't know, depending on the scholarliness of the translator, how accurate they are. But the reason you have in mental formations, for instance, which are the underlying impulses of thought and everything else that's part of our character, why you have so many, many different terms is that if you take a term like emptiness and you say shunyata, shunyata, what does shunyata mean? You'll have 50 English terms that are part of what shunyata means. The emptiness in Sanskrit, or what we call emptiness in Sanskrit. So the interesting thing and that's the other question I wanted to ask today, and just see if you have an answer for it. Why is this scripture? This particular form, there are said to be some 80,000 sutras or something, 84,000 sutras. This particular brief chant of the Hanya Shingyo, the Maha Prajna Paramita. It's the Maha means great, Prajna Paramita means heart of wisdom, perfecting of wisdom. It's HRDIYA, how we pronounce that. That means heart. It means like the center, the essence of it. But it also means human heart, because this teaching is about sentient being. It's not a teaching about the physical universe as separate from us as observers. This is about what it's like for us as sentient beings. So it includes Hridaya, Prajna Maha Hridaya Prajna Paramita Sutra. That means the perfection of wisdom. It's the heart of the teaching. Why is this liturgy? Why does every center all around the world chant this almost daily basis everywhere?
Well, I think Shariputra was the master of Abhidharma, right? So that was the Theravada system. Psychology and how one thing leads to another, thought leads to sensation, leads to this. I think
Abhidharma is the more logical analyses, right? School of the original schools.
So, and it's fascinating in a way because they had flow charts of like this sensation leads to this thought, leads to this is like 2,000 years old. So I think this is a response to that, saying yes, it's all true in a way, but that's not the whole picture. And if you can access Prajna Paramita, which is sometimes called the mother of all Buddhas, you can you don't get caught in all this. It's another system. It's a very elegant system, but the direct insight through Zazen and access to Prajna Paramita, you don't have to go through all those hoops to get to wisdom. You can experience it directly. I didn't realize Shariputra was an actual person until like a couple months ago. I was like, why is he being picked on? And then I realized he set up this whole system.
One of the 10 main disciples of Buddha. But again, that still doesn't answer the question. Why is this pulled out as liturgy and put in the book, and everybody everywhere chants this?
I thought I read in Red Pine that it kind of sums up the way. I mean, it's like no other can do. That's what I heard, that it sums it up. I mean, it's
Red Pine, for those of you who don't know, is Bill Porter. He's Red Pine is his Dharma name. He's a famous translator, poet, and he did a wonderful book on the Heart Sutra where he said this was published somewhere in 900 in China. And it was published at a time that the teaching was going kind of over the deep edge on being able to memorize. I mean, I'm promoting memorization, but at that time it was whoever could quote the sutras the most was the most enlightened, that kind of thing. It went way over. Earlier with Huineng, it went over that same edge, and that's where the famous public burning of the sutras. He went out in public and burned all these probably irreplaceable, priceless sutras, that they had at the time, to make the same point that it's, wait a minute, Buddha said even the teachings are not permanent, they're insubstantial, they're imperfect, so don't reify the teachings to the point that it's erudition is what counts. who can quote all this stuff and who can memorize it the most. It's to be applied, as you're pointing out, and get at the truth of what this is pointing at in your direct experience is the whole point of it, right? And so he said in 900, this was published as a corrective or palliative to the way the teaching was trending, right? Human nature is pushing over this way, right? And we see that in all kinds of professions. Law is a good example where, some of the most respected people in a given profession are respected because they're basically really good hacks, They're really good at defending their position. They're really good at politically, staying on top of the profession. So the same thing here, like let's not lose the essence of this. And stay in touch with what this is getting at. So yeah, it's like a Reader's Digest condensed summary of all the teachings in one. And if these were underlined as links, and you clicked on them, some of these phrases would bring up a whole other sutra. Anybody else?
Isn't it a conversation between absolute wisdom and sort of relative versus absolute? Avalokiteshvara is absolute, and then Shariputra is sort of the understanding that you were talking about, and that's sort of well, you sort of had it, but let's take it one step further.
Right.
Yeah, in the beginning here, it's almost as if Shakyamuni is channeling Avalokiteshvara. He's talking about Avalokiteshvara as the Bodhisattva of compassion, not as, I think one of his disciples was named Avalokiteshvara as his Dharma name. So the one he's referring to here now is the sort of cosmic Bodhisattva of compassion. So he's explaining to Shariputra what actually happened in Avalokiteshvara's meditation. So in this, it's a mystical kind of concept. There's no difference between Buddha's meditation and Avalokiteshvara's. So he couldn't explain Avalokiteshvara's meditation unless he actually experienced the same thing. So this is what they say in Zen, they say rubbing eyebrows with the Buddhas. When you go through this experience yourself, when you have this kind of insight yourself, you are Buddha. You're not, it's not a mystical cosmic idea. It's just that Buddha seeking Buddha, that what we are, that our true nature is this awakened nature, which is wanting to wake up, right? And when we come up against the Buddha Dharma, we say, oh, this seems to be talking about what I think I've been looking for all my life, right? So when you start practicing it, you have to have this ability to give up the self, meaning also give up the self-intention that, me, this middle-aged, past middle-aged, white guy, born in Illinois, and the one who is doing this. No. Giving up the self also means you recognize that not only you're not controlling the breathing, you're not controlling all the things that you think you control. If you think you control your body, next time nature calls, just say, no, I'm going to stick it out. I'm meditating right now. Leave me alone. See how long that lasts. How that works out for you. Right? So in the same sense, we can say the underlying motive, the impulse to do this, I can't really take ownership of that either. Right? It's coming from somewhere, but it's a mystery. I don't know what it is. What we say, Buddha seeking Buddha. Anybody else? Anything else?
Kind of going off on what you just said. Anytime you start taking ownership of anything, that's your ego coming in. Right?
Yeah. Well, you can take ownership in the sense of responsibility. You can say, okay, I'm the crucifix this time. I've got to do this myself. I'm going to take the bullet. So you can have ownership in that sense. But yeah, the other way around, where I feel pride of authorship or something. Is that, need a dose of humility there. Anybody else? How are we doing on time? I forgot to do the timing.
It's 11:51.
Okay. Well, let's just go around the room. I'll call everybody out. Chris, starting with you.
Any questions?
Yeah, what stands out for you here? Why is this liturgy? Why is this included? And I want to have you consider the same question for all the pieces from China and all the pieces from Japan. And Sutra, then why are those particular ones chosen as to be in here? What do you feel is so important about this that it has to be included? You could throw these out. You wouldn't, yeah, we're not going to chant the Heart Sutra.
Is it repetition in different concepts that help the mind grasp what the Heart Sutra is trying to say, rather?
I think that's the way it works. That still doesn't answer the question, why is it included when many others are not? There's the Little Grass Hut, for instance, piece from China. Very nice poem, but it's not included as liturgy. And some monasteries have a book 4 times this thick, the stuff they do. So,
Maybe to make it more condensed, they have the more clear-cutting, sort of hard-hitting lines from the sutra.
yeah, I certainly think that's the reason after this was finally composed, that everybody adapted it. Yeah. Cool. Brian, anything further?
If we included Shariputra's answer in our book, that would probably be more appropriate.
You know what the answers are?
I don't think he answered. I don't think there was any. He's pretty quiet in the middle of all this, right? Maybe he was the wiser one.
He's dead by the time this happened.
Well, there's a link here. There's linked versions of this where Shariputra or Subhuti or Nanda would be asking questions, and you often get the impression that was the first talk show. Here's Buddhist sitting in a place prepared for him. Here's his interlocutor who's interviewing him, right, for the sake of the audience, and the audience is hundreds of monks and nuns and so forth. So this person asking the question often knows the answers, but is not sure that everybody in the audience is clear on this. So he wants Buddha to clarify this. Right? Same thing you see Stephen Colbert. Shariputra, Stephen Colbert here. He's interviewing the guest, and the guest happens to be Shakyamuni. But so there are more certainly involved versions of this, and this was apparently done intentionally, according to Red Pine, to make it, as Chris is saying, make it just very pointed, cutting through the clutter. How about you, Zamai?
I think it's done because it kind of embodies the middle way. I mean, it says it's not this, it's not that. There is none of this and that. Mm-hmm. And this is your intention is all you need. And just, sometimes you gotta just stop reading. And just try to don't go one way or the other. Just sit and be in existence.
Well, certainly in the first seminar we did a couple of weeks ago, he lays out the middle way and he lays out the Eightfold Path, which includes meditation. But I think you're right. I think your intuition is good here, is that this is just homing in on meditation. Saying, so here's what happens, and here's what the implications, and here's why it's important, that we are focusing on experiential truth in our meditation. First sermon is longer than this and goes into a lot of implications. How about you, Chris, with a CH?
I haven't really studied the Heart Sutra, and I didn't know what Prajna Paramita meant till today. But they seem to mention that a lot, and going off of what you just said, it seems to focus on the experiential aspect, the nonverbal aspect, which seems to be the most important aspect. So for a verbal thing, it seems to do a decent job of pointing the finger.
Yeah, these guys were amazing with words, what they could do. And how about you, Yoji? Anything standing out for you?
No, well, again, it's just I think that the Heart Sutra was put together, or it's in there because it points to what practice is, what it's a summary of it and what it's not. I think as Laurel kind of pointed out. And again, and I think that's why it's lasted so long, because it's a summation of the way, and it kind of is a guide for us in our meditation. It's like this is our dharmas are marked by emptiness. You pointed that out earlier, that it's not about the sutras and that it's, the way and how it's marked. And anyway, I think it's a good teaching that helps us become Buddhists. It's a kind of a guide for us.
Anything further?
Yeah, I just think in answer to your question, so like in Tibetan, they call it pith teaching. The pith is like the center of
Pith.
the plant or tree. It's like
Mhm.
where all the nutrients are. And, when I was doing research on Bodhidharma, they were saying there were heart sutras that were 120,000 lines long.
Yeah.
Which they would bury in caves, And so I just counted this as 48. So I think this is just like the accessible version. It's the heart of the matter.
Like bullet point. What's your name again? I'm sorry.
My name's Alex.
Alex.
Yeah, and I haven't seen this Heart Sutra in 2 years, so it's kind of a fresh read. My sense is that it's just this opening opening 4 lines contain just such fundamental insight. And it's, it's like that's what, the essence is. That's how I'm reading this. And then if you understand those first 4 lines, like you're there, right? And then the rest of this is like, as you said, a very pithy way to summarize how to get there. That's why this is fundamental.
The aggregate is form, feeling, thought, impulse, consciousness, variously translated, maybe better words. But they're the 5 dimensions, or aggregate. Skanda means pile, heap, like a heap of clothes or something is a skanda. It means a heap, an aggregate. It's a distinct. You can distinguish it's not absolute separation, but you can distinguish its boundaries. So you can separate it out from the next one. So you can say form. I can distinguish form in my mind, right, from sensation. Okay, so I could say, for instance, I can see and feel see the form of this electron sitting here, and I can see that it's made of wood and so forth. But it also has form. It's what Dogen called the absolute exertion of a thing. It's exerting its own reality. It has a dharma vocation, right? But it doesn't have sensation. Now, people can even argue that. Well, if you put it in the sun, guess what? It turns hot and it expands. Right? And you put it in a cool place, it shrinks. So to that degree, you can say it's engaged in, exchange of energy, right? But we don't call that sensation. So I can differentiate form from sensation. Right? Then I can differentiate sensation from perception. I can have a sensation that I feel, but I can't really tell what it is. I can't differentiate it into seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, any of the senses. So perception, as like you were saying, they have very long slice and dice these kind of interrelationships down to the molecule kind of thing. 12-fold chain of causation is another one of those. And then, so these are the 5 fundamental big piles that you can sort sentient beings experience into. The sentient being experience of a worm will still have those 5. It won't be like ours exactly, right? It won't be as discrete as ours and as full, but each one is an aggregate of a bunch of other stuff. So one way to think about it is if you put them in circles and you have form, you have a sensation, which, and then you have perception, which I like to include conception and perception because it's the back part of the brain. And finally, impulse or motive as 4 circles. When you push them together where they're like a Venn diagram, you can see they all have boundary areas that overlap between them, right? So they're not absolutely distinct. And you can wrap a circle around it you call consciousness. You can say the 5th aggregate, the king aggregate of consciousness, is conscious of form, is conscious of sensation, is conscious of perception, is conscious of motivation or impulse, right? And we can also be conscious of their opposite. So when we sit in Zazen, one of the implications of the 5 skandhas in these first lines of how they become empty is through sensory or adaptation. We adapt to the point that I know what you mean by form. You know, that there's this being sitting in this environment, but I don't exactly feel the distinction anymore. In fact, I feel unified. You know, it's like that part is, so I've transcended that skandha, and now I'm in sensation only. So I'm experiencing sensation. But if I sit still enough, long enough, just as we don't feel the weight of our clothes, we adapt, right? I don't feel this, I don't sense the weight of my clothes. In a similar way, at some point, I'm going to stop sensing, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching, tasting and smell, adapt right away. And we're all sitting here for this time, this hour that we've been talking. Have you been tasting anything? Have you been smelling anything? Well, yes, of course you have, right? But it's so subtle that you've adapted to it. So this is the way the whole system seems to work on a need-to-know basis. You don't need to know your heart is beating. You don't hear it. You don't feel it. You start having a heart attack, you do. Right? So if you look at it that way, you can see we're conscious of these other skandhas, form, feeling, thought, impulse. But if we sit still enough, long enough, that begins to adapt. And so there's some point at which we can return to a consciousness of form, and but we're not really there. And we can return to a consciousness of sensation, but we're not really there, and so forth. Sitting for a long enough time, perception breaks down. We've all experienced that. Those of us sat long enough, sitting facing a wall, vision adapts to vision, and it becomes this weird thing, which is you're not exactly seeing it, the wall anymore. You're seeing light, color, movement. You're seeing something, right? There's something going on there, but it's not really seeing stuff anymore, and so forth. Then impulse, we're all sitting here for reasons. We have all this underlying motive for being here. Not after a while. After a while, it's all falling away. We don't know why we're doing it. So I think you're right, these very first lines here, if you practice to the point that Avalokiteshvara did, where he clearly saw that all these 5 skandhas, the constituents that make up your being, are empty at base, empty of self-existence. This is not a conceptual, rational thought. This is a direct transsensory experience. That makes sense? Well, that's what I think. That's the simple thing that Zen is pointing at. It's not mystical at all. Okay, that's it. We can close with the 4 vows. We usually do Dharma opening verse. Sometimes forget. Snow White left the 7 dwarfs.
Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it.
Thank you for your patience and listening.
Let's see. What do you need? Cards?
Hope something was meaningful there for you. If you want to keep one of those to take with you, please, anybody, if you don't have one.
Yeah.
Keep it. Keep it. This cost is covered in your donation. It's very expensive little piece of paper.